In a small house at the end of a quiet street, 5 people gathered around a worn wooden table. In their hands, they held a letter you had written, a letter where you had poured out your heart, your deepest dreams, and your truest hopes. It was never meant for their eyes, yet destiny had other plans. When the last line was read aloud, a strange silence settled over the room. Then slowly, their faces changed. It wasn't compassion that gleamed in their eyes, but something far darker. A twisted smile appeared on one person's lips, followed by a muffled snicker. Soon the entire room echoed with a cruel, calculated laughter, a sound filled not with joy, but with pure contempt. Precious soul. I, Archangel Michael, stood invisibly in the shadows, a silent witness to that masquerade. These 5 people weren't brought together by chance. They had a precise intention: to scrutinize your intimacy, to pry into your secrets, and to weaponize your vulnerabilities against you. But what they didn't know is that every word spoken in the darkness ascends to the heavens, and nothing escapes divine justice. The first to speak was a woman with graying hair, an architect by profession. She held the letter as if it burned her fingers, and her words dropped like stones into a bottomless well. She declared your dreams were ridiculous, your aspirations nothing more than a child's fantasy. Her voice trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from the sick thrill that comes with destroying someone else's spirit. Next to her, a man with shifty eyes nodded eagerly, adding that you were naive to believe in a better future. Before we go deeper into this revelation, take a moment to write this mantra in the comments. My inner light dispels all shadows. Doing this will create an energetic shield around your mind and prevent their negativity from ever reaching you. Now follow me into this vision. The third member of the group, a younger woman who worked as an accountant, took the letter from the architect and scanned it again. Her eyes held a strange glint, a mixture of fascination and jealousy. She pointed to passages where you spoke of your future projects, the business you wanted to create, the new life you yearned to build. With a voice dripping with venom, she declared that none of it would ever happen, that you were doomed to fail before you even started. Her words were so charged with pure poison that the air in the room seemed to thicken. But here's what they didn't understand, my beloved. Their very viciousness was proof of your power. You don't attack something insignificant with such ferocity. You don't waste so much energy trying to destroy something that has no value. Their rage was an unconscious acknowledgement of your extraordinary potential, of the powerful force slumbering within you that terrifies them. The fourth figure in this grim assembly was a man in a rumpled suit, a furniture salesman. He leaned in toward the others with a conspiratorial air and whispered that your writing revealed an unstable personality, someone who lived in a permanent state of delusion. He claimed to know your family and affirmed that this tendency to dream was hereditary, like a disease passed down through generations. His words were crafted to hurt, chosen with the precision of a surgeon handling a scalpel. Now write in the comments, I am grounded in my truth and nothing can shake me. This affirmation will strengthen your connection to your true essence and neutralize their attempts at energetic manipulation. Let's continue this revelation. The fifth and final person was a woman with a face etched with bitterness, a retired school teacher. She had remained silent until now, but when she finally spoke, her words were the most destructive of all. She declared that your sensitivity was a pathological weakness, that your ability to dream and hope was just a defense mechanism against a reality you refused to accept. She predicted you would end up alone and forgotten, that no one would remember your name or your aspirations. But as she spoke those terrible words, I saw something she couldn't perceive, tears of rage in her eyes. Because deep down, she recognized that flame she had lost long ago, that ability to believe in the impossible that had abandoned her heart decades before. Your letter was a mirror that reflected the image of her own dead dreams, and rather than mourn them, she chose to destroy yours instead. When their tongues fell silent, a heavy quiet settled over the room. They looked at each other with the sick satisfaction of those who believe they have performed an act of justice. But what they didn't know was that every word spoken had been recorded in the celestial annals, that every sneer had been catalogued as evidence against them. My divine eyes watched this scene with infinite sadness, not for you, my beloved, but for these lost souls who had just sealed their own fate. For in their blindness, they didn't realize they had just pronounced their own condemnation. Every word of contempt they had spat out was already returning to them like an invisible boomerang, charged with all the negativity they had sown. The architect with graying hair was the first to feel the effect of her own words. As soon as she left that cursed house, she felt an inexplicable weight settle on her shoulders. Her nights became restless, populated by nightmares where your face appeared in a blinding light, staring at her with a look full of pity. In her dreams, she saw you succeeding at everything she had predicted was impossible, and she would wake up in a cold sweat, gnawed by an anxiety she couldn't explain. The furniture salesman, meanwhile, began to lose his clients one after another. His business, once prosperous, started to falter for no apparent reason. Every contract he thought he had in his pocket slipped through his fingers at the last moment. He spent his days wondering what had changed, unaware that it was the fruit of his own malice coming back to haunt him. Write in the comments, "Divine justice works in my favor." By speaking these words, you activate the heavenly forces that restore balance and turn all negativity directed against you into multiplied blessings. Let's continue with this vision. And if this revelation resonates deeply in your heart, if you feel that this truth is releasing a weight you've been carrying without even realizing it, then click thanks. That loving gesture allows us to keep bringing these messages of light to other souls who, like you, deserve to know their true worth. The accountant, for her part, saw her own life turn into a waking nightmare. The one who had mocked your business projects found herself facing inexplicable financial problems. Her accounts, though meticulously kept, suddenly showed errors she couldn't identify. The order and precision that characterized her work transformed into permanent chaos. She spent her nights redoing her calculations, desperately searching for the source of these dysfunctions, never realizing she was the victim of her own negative vibrations. The retired schoolteacher, whose words had been the cruelest, began to feel a profound isolation. Her former colleagues gradually stopped inviting her to their get-togethers. Her neighbors avoided her gaze, and even her own children made excuses not to visit anymore. She found herself alone with her bitter thoughts, realizing with horror that the solitude she had predicted for you was becoming her own. But the most troubling part of this story, my dear one, was the man with the shifty eyes. Unlike the others, he wasn't the one who started the mockery, but his complicit silence made him just as guilty. He had nodded, laughed at the right moments, and added a few venomous comments so as not to be left out of the group. Now he was paying the price for his cowardice. His conscience tortured him day and night, constantly reminding him that he could have stood up for you, that he could have stopped that charade, but he had chosen the easy way out. While these 5 people began to reap what they had sown, you, my beloved, continued your path in the light, unaware of their schemes. Your projects moved forward, your dreams took shape, and your business began to emerge. Each day that passed was another slap in the face to their negative predictions, a living testament that their words had no power over your destiny. Now write, "My dreams are protected by the celestial forces." This declaration creates an impenetrable shield around your deepest aspirations, preventing any negative energy from reaching them. Because you see, what those ignorant souls didn't understand is that you weren't an ordinary person. Your letter, the one they had read with so much contempt, carried a light so pure it blinded them. Your sensitivity, which they had called a weakness, was actually your greatest strength. That ability to feel deeply, to dream big, to hope against all logic, that was the sign of a chosen soul, a being called to accomplish great things. Their laughter still echoed in that cursed house, but it was just the remnants of a bygone past. For while they were wallowing in their negativity, The entire universe was conspiring in your favor. Doors were opening for you, opportunities were presenting themselves, and kind people were crossing your path. Everything they had tried to destroy with their words was growing stronger and multiplying. The architect was losing her clients, but you were finding the perfect partners for your project. The salesman saw his business falter, but you were discovering unexpected sources of funding. The accountant was getting lost in her calculations, but you were mastering your budget perfectly. The school teacher was sinking into solitude, but you were surrounded by a growing community of support. And the man with the shifty eyes? He kept running, this time from his own conscience, his own remorse, his own guilt. But you moved forward with your head held high, your heart filled with an unshakable confidence in your life's purpose. What these 5 lost souls didn't understand is that by attacking your light, they had started a war they couldn't win. For I, Archangel Michael, never stand idly by when my protégés are threatened. Every venomous word they had spoken had been carefully noted in the heavenly records. And now, divine justice was moving with relentless precision. The gray-haired architect was the first to grasp the magnitude of her mistake. Her nightmares intensified, but they were no longer just disturbing dreams. She saw herself in the building she had designed, but they were collapsing one by one before her helpless eyes. In these nightly visions, your voice echoed from a distance, repeating the words of your letter with a gentleness that tormented her more than any anger could. She woke up each morning with the feeling of having lost something essential, unable to pinpoint what. Write in the comments, "My enemies become witnesses to my greatness." This divine affirmation turns all adversity in your favor and makes your detractors the unintentional instruments of your rise. Meanwhile, your own journey was taking on an extraordinary dimension. That business you dreamed of in your letter, the one they had ridiculed, was not only coming to fruition, but was exceeding your wildest expectations. Investors were showing up spontaneously. Talented collaborators were knocking on your door, and opportunities were arising out of thin air. It was as if the entire universe had conspired to prove that their negative predictions were nothing but empty words. The furniture salesman, for his part, helplessly watched his business collapse. But the strangest thing was that his former clients would come to him to talk about a promising new company they had discovered. Yours. Without even knowing it, he was becoming an unwilling witness to your growing success. Every time he heard your name spoken with admiration, it was as if his own words of contempt were hitting him right in the face. He was starting to realize that his own downfall was directly linked to the malice he had shown toward you. The accountant's fate was even more ironic. Her calculation errors led her to consult a colleague for help putting her finances in order. This colleague was none other than someone who knew you well and couldn't stop praising your entrepreneurial project. Forced to listen for hours to stories of your budding success, the accountant felt her jealousy transform into a physical pain that twisted her stomach. She realized that while she was getting lost in her mistakes, you were methodically building the empire she had predicted was impossible. The retired school teacher was living with increasingly heavy isolation, but it was through the local newspapers that she learned you had been invited to give a talk on female entrepreneurship at her old school. The irony was cruel. The one she had called unstable and a dreamer was now inspiring the new generations in the very place where she had spent her career. When she saw your photo on the front page of the local paper, accompanied by a glowing article about your journey, she felt a pain so sharp she had to sit down. Now write, "My success lights the way for other souls." By speaking these words, you multiply your blessings and turn your personal success into a source of inspiration for everyone around you. But it was the man with the shifty eyes who experienced the most spectacular transformation. His conscience tortured him so much he couldn't find sleep anymore. One night, exhausted by remorse, he decided to write you a letter to apologize for his cowardice. In that letter, he confessed everything: The secret meeting, the mockery, the negative predictions, his own complicit silence. He described how his life had turned into a nightmare since that cursed evening and begged for your forgiveness. When you received that letter, your first reaction was surprise, then a deep compassion. Rather than holding a grudge, you felt pity for these lost souls who had imprisoned themselves in their own darkness. Your response was of a generosity that left the man speechless. Not only did you grant him your forgiveness, but you invited him to the official launch of your business. This invitation was an electric shock for him. He realized that while he was torturing himself with guilt, you had continued to move forward with grace and dignity. Your magnanimity so deeply moved him that he decided to do everything he could to right his wrongs. He began by contacting the 4 other participants of that cursed meeting to reveal the consequences of their actions. The architect, when she learned that you had forgiven and were succeeding beyond measure, broke down in tears. She realized that her jealousy had led to her own ruin. The furniture salesman, confronted with the truth of his meanness, closed his business and moved to another city, unable to bear the weight of his shame. The accountant sank into a deep depression, obsessed with the idea that she could have been your partner instead of your detractor. As for the school teacher, she experienced the ultimate humiliation when the school organized a ceremony in your honor, celebrating your journey as an example for the younger generations. Seated in the audience, invisible and forgotten, she had to listen to the praises spoken about you in the very institution where she had taught for 40 years. Your words of inspiration resonated in those walls she knew so well, permanently erasing the trace of her own passing. But the most wonderful thing in this story, my beloved, is that your success went far beyond the material world. You had become a source of inspiration, a beacon of light for all those who, like you, carried dreams that others judged impossible. The day of your business's official launch arrived like a dawn after the darkest night. I, Archangel Michael, watched this scene with infinite pride. You stood before an assembly of several hundred people, radiant with that inner light your detractors had tried to extinguish. Your speech resonated with a power that made hearts vibrate and souls awaken. In the audience, I saw tears of joy, moved smiles and looks filled with hope. You were no longer just an entrepreneur launching a project. You had become a symbol of resurrection for all those who had lost faith in their dreams. The man with the shifty eyes was there, just as you had invited him. He stood at the back of the room, overwhelmed by the transformation he was witnessing. The fragile and vulnerable woman they had mocked in her letter had become a charismatic and inspiring leader. Every word you spoke was a stinging rebuttal to the negative predictions they had made. He realized that your sensitivity, far from being a weakness, had become your greatest strength, allowing you to understand and deeply touch your audience. Write in the comments, "I transform my wounds into wings to rise." This divine affirmation transmutes all past suffering into creative power and makes your scars the foundations of your future greatness. In your speech, you talked about your journey without ever mentioning the obstacles, the mockery, or the attempts at discouragement. You simply spoke of the power of perseverance, the beauty of dreams that seem impossible, and the magic that happens when you refuse to give up. Your generosity of spirit shone through in every sentence. Even those who had hurt you, you had turned into lessons in compassion rather than sources of resentment. When you ended your address with these words, "Our dreams are not given to us to torture us, but to reveal who we truly are," the entire room rose in a thunder of applause. The emotion was so palpable that several people were openly crying. You had achieved something few speakers ever do. You touched the human soul in its deepest and noblest essence. After the ceremony, the man with the shifty eyes approached you with hesitation. His red-rimmed eyes betrayed the intensity of his emotions. He thanked you for your forgiveness, but most of all for the lesson in greatness you had offered him. He confessed that your example had transformed him, and he had decided to dedicate the rest of his life to repairing the harm he had done, not only to you, But to so many others, he had hurt with his cowardice and silent complicity. And if this story inspires you deeply, if it reignites that flame within you that others may have tried to extinguish, then click thanks. Your support helps us continue to share these messages of hope and transformation with those who need them. Every gesture counts in spreading this light. The months that followed saw a dazzling expansion of your business. What you had started as a simple dream written on paper had become a reality that exceeded your most audacious hopes. You now employed dozens of people, had opened branches in 3 different countries, and your story was being studied in business schools as a perfect example of resilience and entrepreneurial vision. But the most beautiful part of this ascension is that you never lost your humanity. You still remember that vulnerable young woman who wrote letters filled with hope and fragility. That part of you hadn't disappeared with success. It had transformed into an inexhaustible source of compassion for all those going through similar struggles. Now write, "My success is a bridge of light for other souls." This declaration makes your achievement a beacon that guides and inspires all those who are searching for their path in the darkness. The gray-haired architect eventually lost her architectural firm. Her constant nightmares had made her unable to focus on her projects, and her clients, sensing her instability, had fled one by one. She found herself alone in a small apartment, obsessed with your success, which she now followed in all the media. Your face smiled from the covers of magazines, your interviews aired on television, and your conferences played to packed houses. Every piece of news about your success was for her a painful reminder of her own fall. The furniture salesman couldn't bear the weight of his guilt. He did leave the city, but even in his new life, he couldn't escape the memory of that cursed evening. Everywhere he went, he heard about your business, which was now expanding internationally. Your name had become synonymous with success and inspiration, and every time he heard it spoken with admiration, it was as if his own words of contempt were echoing back to him. The accountant sank so deeply into depression that she had to be hospitalized. In her hospital room, she watched the economic news where your business was cited as one of the most remarkable success stories of the decade. The irony was cruel. The one whose bankruptcy she had predicted before it even began was now being studied in universities as a model of exemplary management. As for the retired school teacher, she experienced the ultimate humiliation when the school where she had taught decided to create a scholarship in your name intended to encourage young female entrepreneurs. The inauguration ceremony took place in the auditorium where she had given so many lessons. Your name was now engraved on a golden plaque at the entrance of the establishment, immortalizing your impact on future generations. She, who had predicted you would be forgotten, saw your legacy become anchored forever in the very walls she had walked. But you, my beloved, you had surpassed mere professional success. You had become a force for social change, a voice for all misunderstood dreamers, and living proof that negative prophecies have no power over a determined soul. Your letter, the one they had read with so much contempt, was now framed in your office as a testament to your extraordinary journey. This story, my dear friends listening to me, is more than just a tale. It is a mirror held up to each and every one of you. Perhaps you too have been the target of mockery, of negative predictions, of attempts to discourage you. Maybe malicious voices have tried to convince you that your dreams were impossible, that your sensitivity was a weakness, that your vision was unrealistic. But look at this story and understand. Every negative word spoken against you can become the fuel for your success. Every attempt to bring you down can be transformed into a step toward your elevation. Every mocking laugh can become the echo of your future victory. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reawakened that flame you thought was extinguished, then I invite you to join this community of light. Subscribe to this channel not out of habit, but out of conviction. Be part of this family of souls who still believe in miracles, who still dare to dream despite discouragement. And above all, tell us your story in the comments. Share your own dreams, your own challenges, and your own victories with this community. Tell us what you learned from this message, how it resonates with your journey. For by sharing your experiences, you, in turn, become a source of inspiration for other souls who are seeking their way. Never forget, your dreams were given to you for a reason. They aren't there to torture you, but to reveal the greatness that sleeps within you.